It has been a busy few weeks. I've led the remnants of humanity against an AI menace, saved the lands of the ancients from an evil force, managed and led villagers into construction of settlements, led an army of undead against the living, and went through a journey of nostalgia and self-reflection. After all that, I felt the need to play something a little bit more relaxing. It was then that I saw Willowbrooke Post, a game I've long waited for the release of. I thought to myself, the running and managing of a post office sounds like just what I needed. But instead of it being a relaxing dream I'd hoped for, it quickly turned into my worst nightmare. Willowbrooke Post is a story-based management game currently being developed by Dante and Knoxx and published by Excalibur games. It released on Steam Early Access March 27, 2019 with a full release estimated in 1 year time. Willowbrooke Post is an interesting title combining the management genre with elements from Papers, Please. It has massive potential, but right now has so many broken mechanics and bugs that it is utterly unplayable. Before we get started, I'd like to note I've spent 90 minutes in total with this game and have been unable to get any further than day 2. Therefore, my assessment of the game as a whole will be judged based on the content experienced during the first 2 days of the game. In Willowbrooke Post, you take on the role of either the son or daughter of the owners of the post office in a small village called Willowbrooke. You receive a letter from your parents asking you to come to Willowbrooke to look after the post office for them while they're away for the year. You set out on New Year's Eve and get the next train to the village. Upon arriving at your parents' post office, you find a letter on the desk from your father with brief further instructions on your duty. And from here, you must learn the ropes of managing the post office, your only help being your journal and the trusty postman Pete. The introduction to Willowbrooke Post is intriguing. It throws you into the deep end where you need to figure things out mostly for yourself while dealing with a varied and interesting cast of characters. Sadly, the only characters I was really properly introduced to is Pete the postman and the eccentric and flamboyant Magnifique. Pete is a sort of shy person that takes a while to get to know you before feeling comfortable talking to you, and that gets easily distracted by social media and videos of cats. And Magnifique is an over-the-top character that has an unhealthy obsession with his own beauty, so much so he has a self-proclaimed world-famous stare that has the power to kill you. The stare is one of the greatest and most horrifying things I've ever witnessed. It's such a shame as Pete and especially Magnifique makes such a first impression on the fun and over-the-top nature, showcasing the potential of the game's cast of characters, only for it to then be destroyed by problems I will get to shortly. Of what little of the plot I managed to experience, it left a great impression, especially with the characters, but it is a pity that I cannot comment any further than that due to not being able to progress. I was really looking forward to seeing what other interesting characters the game has in store, as if the first 2 are anything to go by, it is looking like a world full of character and charm. The gameplay to Willowbrooke Post is actually on quite a complex level. It consists of a lot of small mechanics that on their own aren't complex, but when you combine them together it really creates quite an in-depth experience. If I was to give an example comparison to other titles, I would call Willowbrooke Post a management game meets Papers, Please. A management game in the sense that you manage and keep everyday runnings of the post office going and make sure it isn't shut down, while the Papers, Please inspiration comes in the sorting and correct stamping of letters and packaging of parcels. That is, of course, all the while keeping your own stamina from running out, which ultimately will result in you fainting. It is a promising foundation, but let's get more into the nitty-gritty of it all. At the start of the day, you awake from a night's sleep at 6 AM. The post office opens at 9 AM, allowing you to get a head start on the day before customers start coming in. During this time, you can cook yourself a meal to keep you going throughout the day, talk to Pete before he leaves with the post deliveries, and you can collect the post and start sorting it out. Let's start with the stamina mechanic. How this works is that as you progress through the day, your stamina meter goes down. It appears it depletes over the course of time as opposed to it lowering due to specific tasks that you complete. It is a neat little mechanic that is understandable to have in a game. As we work throughout the day, our energy levels lower and we get tired. The issue with it here, like with many early access games with such a mechanic, is that it lowers at a ridiculously fast pace. You can start the day with a full stamina bar and by 12 or 1 o'clock it'll be nearly running out, and the closer it gets to being empty, the slower your movement speed is and the screen begins to wave side to side, kind of like how insanity is often depicted in horror games. The only way to restore your stamina during the day is to eat food or drink coffee, but you need to buy the ingredients to cook the food and the coffee beans to make the coffee. And from what I've been able to play, the price of the ingredients is greater than that of the post office income. So come the 3rd day of the game, you wouldn't have enough stamina to get through the entire day. And to make things worse, right now, a night's sleep only restores out half your stamina, so you're pretty much screwed. If you faint, you automatically go to bed and sleep until the following afternoon, though how you end up with double the money you did before fainting is beyond me. This is just one example of how much of a mess the game currently is. The stamina mechanic and the consequences of fainting are completely and utterly broken. Your stamina lowers too quickly, you don't restore enough stamina from sleep, ingredients are too expensive to make food on a daily basis to restore your stamina, and the consequences of fainting are more rewarding from a money perspective than actually playing the game as intended. But that is only the beginning of the game's problems. As previously mentioned, you regain stamina by making food in the kitchen. At present there are two recipes, apple pie and boiled eggs. Apple pie restoring the larger amount of stamina but also being the most costly with more ingredients. In order to get more ingredients to make more food, you need to buy them by using the computer. Each ingredient you buy is added automatically to your inventory, but very often when you do this, despite the item being in your inventory, the actual recipe won't register with the items. This results in the recipe telling you that you don't have the items in your bag even when you do, stopping you from making the food item you wanted, only furthering the issues with the stamina. At the start of each day you will find your post including junk mail at the door. You must collect this and the mail in the post box and bring them to the sorting office. This mechanic is also bugged to high heaven too, as when you collect the post from the post box, it sometimes fills back up with junk mail and keeps refilling each and every time you empty it. I can't imagine that being an intended feature. As for the sorting of the mail, this is where the Papers, Please inspiration comes into play. Here you must apply the correct stamp to each of the letters. There are 5 stamps in total, each with their own specific meaning. One is a pass, which is where everything is correct on the envelope. The other 4 are different coloured flags, each with their own requirements. The red one is for incorrect addresses and lockbox preference. The green is for damaged elements or no valid stamp. The orange is for excess weight or unwanted junk mail, and the purple is for priority mail, mail that needs to be collected at the post office or requires a signature from the receiver. Your job is to identify which of the stamps needs to be correctly applied to each of the letters using the addresses detail in the top right corner of the screen. And with junk mail, it is simply a case of choosing whether or not the junk mail is sent to the person or not, depending on their preferences. If you place the correct stamp on a letter, a message prompt will appear saying sorting fine, but if incorrect, no message will appear. It is a perfectly functional system on a fundamental level and quite enjoyable of what I got to experience of it. Any letters that must be collected by the address in person must be phoned, so you need to call the person to come to collect the letter at the post office. I like the idea you need to call the person for them to come and collect their letters at the post office at some point throughout the day. It adds that sense of community that the game's going for. The overall sorting of the post works well on a fundamental level, and the ins and outs of its workings are explained with a 2-page notebook on the top right that you flick through at any time. The problem is that very often I wasn't sure what I was doing wrong or why the sorting of a particular letter wasn't right. In Papers, Please you receive a fax message telling you the mistake you made, but here there is nothing and it is extremely frustrating, lessening the enjoyment of it. Another issue with this mechanic is that sometimes when calling someone to collect or sign for their letter, the call endlessly rings like the person won't answer, and when this happens you're stuck on the screen and can't get out of it, forcing you to Alt-Tab or Control-Alt-Delete out of the game, restarting it and starting the day over. Along with sorting out the town's post, you can sort out your own junk mail. Any junk mail that you receive can either be opened or thrown away. Opening junk mail can cause various afflictions. One example of this is where you find a leaking bottle of shampoo, though I don't quite understand what way this affects you. Another example is where you hurt your hand, or at least that is the impression I get from the icon, which appears to dramatically speed up the rate that your stamina lowers. How exactly you hurt your hand is beyond me, other than maybe receiving the worst paper cut of your life. But sometimes you do receive an item like an isotope drink that can be used to restore your stamina. I'm guessing the idea with opening up the junk mail is to have some kind of high risk, high reward sort of system. Having such a system is fine, but the lack of information about afflictions that it causes is not. No message pop-ups, no description appears if you hover the cursor over the icons, nothing. Not to mention some of the effects are so imbalanced and damaging that you never want to open a junk letter again. In the end, you would do what you would in real life, bin them, making it a redundant system because of its problems. Then there is the parcel side of things. On your first day on the job you will have a parcel that you must give to Magnifique upon his arrival as soon as the post office opens. The interesting aspect of this mechanic is that if you want to, you can actually open the parcel and take the contents out of it, keeping it for yourself. In Magnifique's case, you can take his camera. Upon Magnifique arriving to collect his parcel, you have 2 options on how you deal with the situation, each with a different outcome. You can either tell him the parcel didn't arrive, or you can tell him that you took it. If you tell him it didn't arrive, he will be disappointed and slowly walk out of the post office sad. If you tell him you took it, he will be outraged and storm off with an angry face on him, each of which will ultimately lower your reputation with him. Unfortunately, I've been unable to get into this mechanic any further than that, but the idea of being able to steal from the parcels is an interesting one, and I look forward to trying it out more as development progresses and the game gets to an actual stable stage. Then there is the packaging of parcels. On the first day, a character called Ren will arrive asking you to package up and post a parcel for him. How this works is that you must pack the item into a parcel in a way that the customer asks for it. For example, Ren's parcel parcel is quite simple. You simply stick the item in the box, fill the box with parcel filling, then tape it and place an address label on it, and that is pretty much it. But it seems that later throughout the game there are other options too, such as adding ribbons, a variety of different wrapping papers, decorations, and so on and so forth. Much like with the sorting of the letters, there is a handbook at the parcel packaging desk that you can use as a guide if needed, along with a box in the top left of the screen telling you how the customer wants the parcel packaged, so there's no worries of having you to remember the order. As far as Willowbrooke Post goes in regards to mechanics working, the packaging and parcel actually appears to be working perfectly fine, much to my surprise. Like with most aspects of Willowbrooke Post, it is an interesting mechanic that looks like it will get more complex the further in the game you progress. After that, there isn't a whole lot more I can talk about when it comes to Willowbrooke Post due to its issues. It seems, judging by what is said in one of the letters left for you by your parents, at some point in the game you will be able to grow crops and sell them to the villagers, but right now that actually remains to be seen. As a whole, the gameplay to Willowbrooke Post has massive potential. All the groundwork is there, the developer just needs to get to a point where it is actually playable. And right now it certainly isn't at such a point, so much so I haven't even mentioned all the issues with the game yet. There are other such issues such as frame rate drops, long load times, the game getting stuck on another screen other than the sorting office, and so on and so forth. It does give you insight into the workings of the game, but the impression and experience it provides right now is too little and just isn't enjoyable. There are early access games, and then there are games that are not even ready for early access. Willowbrooke Post was not ready for early access in any shape or form. Having a game launch using Steam's early access program with some bugs is understandable, but for it to be practically unplayable is just unacceptable, even at its discounted price of €5.94. My short time with the game was interesting, but not enjoyable. It has its charm, but the only positive thing I can say about it would be the characters of the game are great. Magnifique is a genuinely brilliantly designed character that is full of charm and personality, even if he is a bit eccentric. But other than that, Willowbrooke Post is an absolute mess. If you're interested in the concept, wishlist it and see how the development progresses over time. But for now, my advice to you is save your money, as there are far better and more functioning games out there.